30. Because back then, if you were 30, you were a grandma. You were old. You had no place on the tour. Now they're 50. Okay, they're 40. Yeah, but still, I was like, man, and I think back, I'm like, I couldn't have done it. And I think because my mindset was already starting to wind down, right? So that the goals are the first thing. As I got into the business side, and started really with the USDA, Alan Schwartz, who was a past president, who is a past president of the USDA, was, he owned and still owns, or a family, several tennis clubs in Chicago. But one of the clubs in Chicago, he opened up for me to come and take, have free court time, etc. And this is at the age of 7. So he saw something in me then that other people probably didn't see. And so he kind of followed me throughout my career, because I'm from Chicago, and Chicago's a huge tennis town, and everybody supported one another, which was great, and especially in the public park system. But he brought me into the USDA volunteer sector. He appointed me to a committee, and once I got to an annual meeting, and I saw 1,000 other people, I'm like, what are all these people doing here? And they're like, oh no, they're volunteers. I'm like, what? I'm like, why? You attend the meeting and you listen to everything, and I'm like, oh, this is dope. This is really cool. I learned what the USDA did. They weren't just running tournaments. It wasn't just the USDA ranking, which is when you're a kid, that's all you know. And as a player, I knew they ran the US Open. But I learned that it was really about grassroots. And once I started to know that, I said, I'm a recipient of that. I was that grassroots child that played in the CDTA Excellence Program, that played on our Junior Fed Cup team, that played on our USA Collegiate team. Wow, this place is awesome. So I wanted to learn more and more about it, and then I had the passion to want to get back. And that's how I started moving up. And then Dave Haggerty, actually John Bogosian was a big sponsor of mine. He was also from Chicago, and he was an advocate for me, and always being very positive and trying to bring me in to conversations, introducing me to all of these, high level people, not just in tennis, but in business, particularly from Chicago. And then Dave Haggerty, who was he was my predecessor, was a big supporter of mine. And he is now the president of the ITF, International Tennis Federation, and I'm the vice president. So I'm still under him, and it's been a great experience. So those are those male sponsors that I had, and I have a lot of, female sponsors as well that work with. A lot of them are all past presidents, well, not all of them. Jane Brown Grimes, who just passed away earlier this year, was a huge supporter of mine. We often used to meet for coffee or lunch, and she would give me advice when I told her that I wanted to be the president. She couldn't have been more thrilled, and started asking the right questions as to why and this and that, and then started to give me advice along the way. And so you have to have those people that you can lean on. Any other questions? Yes.
So when President Obama became the first, he was under intense scrutiny, more so. So I want to know, did you feel any intense scrutiny? How did you handle anything like that?
Chapter 2. All eyes on me. Need I say more? No. So there we go. There's pressure. I mean, I realized that I represented more than just myself and my family. And I represented, and the organization, I represented a culture of people. And I knew, one, I had the support, but two, I knew they were like, okay, girl, don't you mess this up. Don't be the last one. So yes, all eyes were on me, and there was an enormous amount of pressure, but I took it in stride, and I continue to do that today. It's a challenge, and the challenge is not, our system is very, a lot of bureaucracy that's in the USTA pathway. And so Doesn't mean that I'm the last. Hopefully we'll get another one in a couple years. We have a black female who's a vice president now, and maybe in 4 years perhaps, she'll be the next one because we have a first vice president and then president. And so yeah, they're all eyes on me. Chapter 2. Yes.
Question. So when I grew up, it was Andy Agassi. You know, I only saw tennis on the big screen. Now, as fans, we're so much a part of the lives of the professionals, right? We buy their clothing, we endorse them, and with how social media has
Buy our books.
we buy their books. We do buy their books. Right? How do you think that has affected the sport and then just the fandom as a whole? Has it helped it that we're so much more part of the lives of all the players? Or has it hurt it because, like, if Serena gets a bad call, then everybody wants to shoot their judges? Like this.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously it's helped it. You gotta have the fans, right? If you don't have the fans, you don't have growth and development in the sport. So, you know, the fact that we can watch, I can go on my phone right now and find out what's happening in the ULs live, I think it's huge, because there's probably somebody in the back that's watching the match right now. I know it is, see? And so no, absolutely, it has helped it.
Okay.
But what I think it has also done is allow people to be more in tune and be more personable with the athletes that they are supporting, and you're following them more, right? Which is bringing the ratings up, et cetera. So that's a positive thing. I do think that we take a lot of things personally when you're a fan of individuals, and, you know, we throw stuff at the TV and, you know, punching each other or sitting on the couch. But it's, you know, that's in any sport. That's in any sport. So I think it's been exciting for tennis to be able to have the platform that we do digitally, to be able to go on our phones, our laptops and tablets to watch the sport. Yes.
Thank you. Question. How do you think that young players are now navigating the issues of mental illness relative to their own brands? And is it a short-term strategy? Is it long? How's it going to affect both their perception and also their careers? Because it is a short career just based on physicality.
So we have all dealt with mental illness at some time. You know, anytime you're struggling and you're down or whatever, I mean, it's a form of it, right? And it's how you overcome it. And I think the generation before me, you just didn't talk about it. And you didn't, there were no labels then, right? There were no diagnoses. Yeah, like diagnoses. No, it's a diagnosis. I know. I was like, that's not right. There were no diagnoses then. And as we address it now, it only takes one person to change the world. When you have one person that steps up and talks about it, and they're like, oh my God, I'm not alone. I feel the same way, or I've felt the same way, or I had the same experience. And so Marty Fish actually was the first one in tennis to openly talk about it about 10 years ago. The pressures that he had with anxiety. I mean, he could not breathe. He got to the point that he could not breathe because of anxiety, and he talks about it. In his match, he's here at the U.S. Open, going to play the biggest match of his career against Federer in the semifinals, and he couldn't play. He couldn't breathe. And until someone said, you don't have to play. And he's like, oh. I mean, and so he talks about that. But nobody really paid attention to it then, because we didn't have this, right? We didn't have this. And so this opens up the world to everyone, and once one person says it and puts it out there, it goes viral. And then everyone else is in tune with what's going on. So therefore, hey Stephen, everything goes, it's more about understanding yourself and understanding the importance of it in how it's addressed. And so you see it now in all sports. You see it now in business. And so I think it's a healthy thing because people are now able to address it and accept it and actually do something about it and get help. So I think that's the most important thing. Any more questions back there? Yes, Mark.
So,
Thank you.
I think you underestimate the impact that you had